The dust devil that swept across Sarah Nolan's dying cornfield that September afternoon in 1878 seemed like a fitting symbol for everything in her life spinning out of control. She stood on the sagging porch of her farmhouse outside St. Louis, Missouri, watching the swirling column of dirt tear through what little remained of her crops, and wondered how much longer she could keep pretending she had any hope of making it through another winter. Her husband Thomas had been dead nearly 18 months now, killed by a spooked horse that had thrown him against the barn wall. And in those months, Sarah had watched everything they had built together crumble like dried clay. She was 24 years old, though she felt ancient most days. The neighboring farmers had offered help at first, the way decent folks did when tragedy struck, but their charity had limits and their own families to feed. The fence posts were rotting, the barn roof leaked in 3 places, and half her cattle had wandered off through the broken barriers or been sold off cheap just to buy flour and beans. Her younger brother Samuel had written from Kansas City offering to send money, but she knew he had a new baby and his own struggles. Pride was a fool's luxury, her mother used to say, but Sarah clung to it anyway because it was all she had left besides this failing piece of land. The stranger appeared on the road just as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if Sarah had any energy left for noticing such things. He was leading a paint horse, moving slow like a man who had been walking a while, and even from a distance she could see he was tall and lean in that way cowboys often were, all sinew and hard living. Sarah's hand moved instinctively to the rifle propped beside the door. A woman alone had to be careful, especially these days with drifters and desperate men roaming the roads looking for whatever they could take. He stopped at the property line where her fence had collapsed completely, the posts lying sideways in the grass like fallen soldiers. She watched him study the damage for a long moment, then look up toward the house where she stood. He raised one hand in greeting, non-threatening, and called out in a voice that carried across the distance. "Madam, your fence is down. You know you have cattle wandering." "I know it," Sarah called back, trying to keep the defensive edge from her voice. "Been meaning to fix it." The stranger tied his horse to one of the still-standing posts and walked closer, stopping a respectful distance from the porch. In the fading light, she could make out his features better now. He was perhaps 28 or 30, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that seemed kind despite the road dust covering him. He wore clothes that had seen better days but were clean, and his boots were worn but well-maintained. "Name's Lucas Xavier, madam. I have been traveling from Texas, looking for work. I could not help but notice your fence there is in bad shape, and I saw at least 3 head of cattle out on the road about a mile back. I appreciate the information, Mr. Xavier, but I cannot afford to hire help right now." The words tasted bitter, but they were true. Lucas looked back at the broken fence, then at the sagging barn, the overgrown yard, the whole picture of slow collapse. When he met her eyes again, there was something in his expression she could not quite read, not pity exactly, maybe understanding. "I was not looking to be paid, madam. Just thought I might fix that fence for you before your whole herd wanders off. Would not take more than a few hours if you have some spare posts and wire." Sarah felt her throat tighten. Kindness from strangers was somehow harder to bear than their indifference. "Why would you do that?" He shrugged, a movement that seemed both casual and somehow sad. "Because it needs doing and I can do it. Sometimes that is reason enough." She should have sent him away. Every practical bone in her body said not to trust a drifter, no matter how kind his eyes seemed. But desperation had a way of drowning out caution, and the truth was she needed help so badly it was like a physical ache. "There are some posts behind the barn," she said finally. "Wire too, though I do not know if there is enough. I will make do with what there is." Lucas tipped his hat to her. "Might be too dark to finish tonight, but I will get started." Sarah watched him walk back to his horse and lead it toward the barn. She should have felt relief or gratitude, but instead she felt that familiar tightness in her chest that came from holding too much inside for too long. She went back into the house and tried to focus on preparing a meager dinner of beans and cornbread, but she kept moving to the window to watch Lucas work in the fading light. He moved with the efficient economy of someone who knew exactly what he was doing, setting posts and stringing wire with practiced hands. When full darkness finally forced him to stop, Sarah found herself walking out to the barn with a lantern. Lucas was settling his horse in one of the empty stalls, brushing the animal down with handfuls of straw. "You should come to the house for supper," she said, the words coming out more abrupt than she intended. "It is not much, but you should eat." He turned and smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "That is kind of you, madam. I would appreciate that." They walked back to the house in silence, and Sarah was acutely aware of how strange it felt to have a man beside her again, even a stranger. Inside, the lamplight made everything look warmer than it was, hiding the cracks in the walls and the threadbare furniture. Lucas removed his hat and stood awkwardly until she gestured to the table. "Sit. I need to hear about those cattle you saw." Over dinner, which Lucas ate with genuine appreciation despite its simplicity, he told her about the 3 cows he had spotted wandering near the main road. They were heading east, looked like. "If you want, I could go round them up tomorrow, bring them back before they get too far." "Mr. Xavier, I already told you I cannot pay for help. And I already told you I was not asking for pay." He met her eyes directly. "Look, Mrs. Nolan, I know it is not my place to speak plainly, but I can see you are struggling here. I have been drifting for near 2 years now, and I am tired of it. I am good with cattle, good with repairs, and I am not afraid of hard work. Let me stay and help get this place back in shape." The directness of it caught her off guard. "You do not even know me. This is not your problem." "Maybe not. But I have been running from my own problems long enough. Maybe helping someone else with theirs is exactly what I need." He paused, studying his coffee cup. "I lost my own place back in Texas. Drought took everything. My wife died of fever the same year. I have been wandering ever since, picking up work where I could find it, but it is a hollow way to live. This place needs help. I need a purpose. Seems like maybe we could help each other." Sarah felt something crack inside her chest at the raw honesty in his voice. He had lost everything too. He understood. "I have one small room off the back that was meant to be a pantry. It is not much, but there is space for a bedroll, and I can feed you though the food is plain. But I still cannot pay wages, Mr. Xavier. That has to be clear. Room and board is payment enough while we get things sorted. And please call me Lucas." She nodded slowly. "Sarah. My name is Sarah." That night, lying in her empty bed, Sarah listened to the unfamiliar sound of someone else moving around in her house. Lucas had been respectful and quiet, settling into the small room without complaint, but his presence changed everything. The house felt less empty, less like a tomb of memories. It terrified her almost as much as it comforted her. She woke before dawn out of habit and found Lucas already up, standing in the kitchen looking uncertain. "I did not want to presume to start a fire or make coffee," he said. "You will be working hard. You should eat." Sarah moved past him to start the stove, and they fell into an awkward dance of proximity, both trying to maintain proper distance in the small space. Over the next several days, Lucas proved himself to be a man of his word. He rode out at first light and brought back all 3 wandering cattle, then spent 2 full days repairing and reinforcing the fence line. Sarah found herself watching him work when she should have been focused on her own tasks. There was something mesmerizing about the way he moved, confident and capable, and she felt a flutter of something she had not experienced in a long time, something that made her feel guilty and alive all at once. On the third evening, as they sat down to dinner, Lucas looked at her seriously. "Sarah, I need to speak honestly with you about this place. I have been looking things over, and you have bigger problems than just the fence." Her defenses went up immediately. "I am aware of my problems, Lucas. I am sure you are. But I am thinking maybe you need someone to tell you that they are not unsolvable. The barn needs repair work before winter, and you need to get at least part of that field planted with winter wheat if you want any income come spring. Your cattle are in decent shape, but you only have 7 head when you should have at least 15 to make any real profit, and that well pump is about ready to give up entirely." Sarah felt the weight of it all pressing down on her like a physical thing. I know all of that. But knowing what needs doing and having the means to do it are 2 different things. I am not criticizing. I am saying let me help. I have been thinking about it, and if you are willing, we could make a real go of this place. I can do the repair work and help with the planting. Come spring, we could sell off some of the calves and use that money to buy more breeding stock. It will be hard work and it will take time, but it is possible." "Why?" the question burst out of her. "Why would you tie yourself to a failing farm and a woman you barely know? You could find paid work anywhere." Lucas was quiet for a long moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "Because I have been drifting for 2 years trying to forget that I failed to save my farm, failed to save my wife. Every place I stopped, I did just enough work to earn a few dollars and moved on because staying meant facing the fact that I was alone and had nothing. But watching you these past few days, seeing how hard you are fighting to hold onto this place, it reminded me of something my father used to say. He said a person is not defined by what they lose, but by what they are willing to fight for. You are fighting for this place, Sarah. Let me fight alongside you." The raw emotion in his voice brought tears to her eyes that she blinked away fiercely. "I do not want charity, Lucas. This is not charity. This is partnership. We work together, we split the profits when there are profits. You need help, and I need a reason to stop running." He paused. "Unless you want me to go, if that is what you want, I will leave in the morning, but I am hoping you will let me stay." Sarah looked at this man who had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had been too proud to pray. Everything about this was improper and probably foolish, but she was so tired of doing everything alone, of carrying the whole weight by herself. "You can stay," she said quietly. "God help us both, but you can stay and help." The relief on his face was unmistakable, and for the first time since Thomas died, Sarah felt something like hope stirring in her chest. The next weeks fell into a rhythm that felt both strange and right. Lucas rose with the sun and worked until dark, tackling the endless list of repairs and improvements the farm needed. Sarah found herself working alongside him more often than not, holding boards while he hammered, passing him tools, learning to see her property through his eyes. He had a way of making overwhelming problems seem manageable, breaking everything down into smaller tasks that could actually be accomplished. "See, the barn roof is not as bad as it looks," he said one morning as they climbed up to inspect the damage. "We need to replace maybe 20 shingles and patch that corner, but the main structure is sound. We can do this in a day, 2 at most." Sarah looked at the gaping holes that had seemed insurmountable and felt that flutter of hope again. "You make everything sound possible." "That is because most things are possible if you are willing to work at them." He glanced at her with that smile that made something warm bloom in her chest. You are tougher than you give yourself credit for, Sarah. This place is still standing because of you. It is standing because you showed up and fixed my fence, she said, trying to deflect the compliment. I fixed a fence. You have been holding this whole operation together for 18 months on your own. That takes real strength. His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary, and Sarah felt her breath catch. She looked away quickly, focusing on the shingles. This was dangerous territory, these moments when she became too aware of him as a man and not just a helper. She was a widow, and he was a drifter who had needed a place to land. That was all this was. That was all it could be, but her heart was not listening to her head's reasonable arguments. They worked on the barn roof under a sky that threatened rain, racing against the weather. Lucas moved across the pitched surface with the easy confidence of someone who had done this kind of work his whole life. And Sarah tried to focus on handing him shingles and nails, instead of noticing the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders, or how his hands moved with such capable grace. "Tell me about your husband," Lucas said suddenly, and Sarah nearly dropped the hammer. "Why?" "Because you never talk about him, and I think maybe that is part of what is eating at you. Sometimes it helps to remember out loud." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, caught between the urge to shut down the conversation and a strange desire to tell him. Thomas was a good man. Solid and steady. We grew up together, got married when I was 19. He had dreams of making this place into something special, a real cattle ranch. He worked himself half to death trying to make it happen. You loved him. Of course I loved him. But if I am honest, and maybe I should not be this honest, it was a comfortable kind of love. Safe. We were partners more than we were passionate, if that makes sense. She paused, surprised at her own words. I have never said that out loud before. There is nothing wrong with that kind of love. Safe and steady is not a bad thing. No, it was not bad. It just was not what I imagined love would be when I was a girl. Sarah sat back on her heels, looking out over the farm. After he died, I felt guilty that I was not more devastated. I mourned him, I did, but mostly I was just terrified of being alone and losing everything we had built. Does that make me terrible? It makes you human. Lucas stopped hammering and looked at her directly. I loved my wife Emily, but if I am being honest too, ours was also more of a practical partnership than a grand romance. We cared for each other, we worked well together, but there was always something missing. I felt guilty about that after she died, like maybe if I had loved her more or better, God would not have taken her. That is not how it works. I know that now. Took me a long time to understand that grief and guilt get all tangled up sometimes, and we punish ourselves for things that are not our fault. He went back to hammering. But I think we both know what was missing in those marriages, Sarah. We know because we can feel it happening now between us. That spark that makes safe love turn into something more. Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Lucas, we should not talk about this. Why not? Because it is not proper. Sarah, there is nothing proper about our whole situation. I am living in your house. We work side by side from dawn to dark, and everyone in town already thinks whatever they are going to think. Why not be honest about what is happening? Because I am scared, she said, the words barely above a whisper. I am scared of losing someone again. I am scared of being hurt. I am scared of feeling this much. Lucas set down his hammer and moved to sit beside her on the roof, careful to maintain a respectful distance even as every fiber of Sarah's being wanted to lean into him. I am scared too. Terrified, actually. But I am more scared of waking up one day and realizing I let something real slip away because I was too afraid to reach for it. We have only known each other a few weeks. Sometimes that is all it takes. My parents knew each other 3 days before my father proposed. They were married 42 years before he died, and happy every one of those years. He turned to look at her, and his eyes were so earnest it made her chest ache. I am not saying we need to rush into anything. I am just saying maybe we can be honest that this is more than just a business arrangement. Maybe we can admit that we care about each other and see where that leads. Sarah wanted to argue, to maintain the walls she had built around herself, but she was so tired of pretending. I do care about you. More than I should, more than is wise. You make me feel things I thought I would never feel. The smile that spread across Lucas's face was like sunrise. That is the most encouraging thing anyone has said to me in years. Despite herself, Sarah laughed, and it felt like releasing something that had been locked inside too long. We should finish this roof before it rains, practical as always. Someone has to be, since you are apparently a romantic. They worked in companionable silence after that, but something had shifted between them. The air felt charged with possibility, and when their hands brushed passing tools, Sarah did not pull away as quickly. She could feel herself opening up in ways that both thrilled and terrified her. The rain held off until they finished the last shingle. They had barely climbed down the ladder when the sky opened up, soaking them in seconds. They ran for the house, laughing like children, and tumbled through the door dripping and breathless. "We made it," Lucas said, pushing wet hair back from his face. Sarah looked at him standing in her kitchen, water puddling around his boots, grinning like the rain was the best thing that had happened all day, and something inside her simply gave way. She crossed the space between them without thinking, without planning, and kissed him. For a heartbeat, he went still with surprise, and then his arms came around her, and he was kissing her back with a tenderness that made her knees weak. It was nothing like kissing Thomas, nothing safe or comfortable about it. This was fire and want and something wild that she had never experienced before. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "Sarah, I know. This is probably foolish and too fast and completely improper. I was going to say this is the best moment of my entire life." She laughed, a sound caught between joy and tears. "We are a mess, Lucas Xavier. The best kind of mess." He cupped her face in his hands, and his eyes were so full of emotion it took her breath away. "I am going to court you properly, Sarah Nolan. I am going to do this right. We live in the same house. I do not think proper courtship is really possible at this point. Then I will be improperly proper. I will bring you wildflowers from the meadow and compliment your cooking and ask permission to hold your hand." His thumb brushed across her cheek. "I will show you every single day that you are precious to me." Sarah felt tears slip free, but they were good tears, healing tears. "I have not felt precious in a very long time. Then I have a lot of making up to do." They stood there in the kitchen, dripping water all over the floor, holding each other while rain drummed on the newly repaired roof. And Sarah felt something she had thought lost forever. She felt like herself again, not just the widow struggling to survive, but Sarah, a woman who could laugh and want and love. Over the following weeks, Lucas was true to his word. He courted her with a sweetness that made her heart ache in the best way. He brought her wildflowers every few days, the simple prairie blooms that cost nothing but the time to pick them. He insisted on taking her into St. Louis for dinner at a proper restaurant, even though it meant spending money they did not really have. He asked permission before taking her hand or putting his arm around her, treating her with a respect that somehow made every touch more meaningful. They worked the farm together, planting winter wheat in the fields that had been lying fallow, repairing the well pump, caring for the cattle. But now every shared task felt different, charged with the awareness of growing feelings. When Lucas taught her how to properly mend harness leather, his hands guiding hers, she was acutely aware of his warmth behind her. When she patched his work shirt, sitting by lamplight while he read aloud from the newspaper, she felt a domestic contentment she had never experienced in her marriage. "Listen to this," Lucas said one evening, looking up from the paper. "They are talking about running telephone lines out to the farms within the next few years. Can you imagine being able to talk to someone miles away without leaving your house? It sounds like something from a Jules Verne novel. The world is changing fast. Sometimes I wonder what it will look like when we are old." He caught himself and looked at her almost shyly. "When we are old. I am assuming a lot, are I not?" Sarah set down her sewing and looked at this man who had become the center of her world in just a few short months. "You are not assuming anything that I am not thinking too, Sarah." He set aside the paper and crossed to kneel beside her chair. "I know we said we would take this slow, but I have to tell you something. I love you. I have loved you for weeks now. Maybe from the first moment I saw you standing on that porch looking so fierce and fragile at the same time. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you laugh like it is something precious you are afraid to waste. I love working beside you every day and sitting with you every evening. I love the life we are building together." Sarah's hands were shaking as she reached out to touch his face. "I love you too. I did not think I could feel this way, but you make me feel alive in ways I never have before. You make me believe in possibilities. Then marry me. I know it might seem too soon to some folks, but I do not care what they think. I want to build a real future with you, a real family. I want to be your husband and your partner in every way. Marry me, Sarah." The practical part of her brain tried to list all the reasons to wait, to be cautious, but her heart was having none of it. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." Lucas pulled her down off the chair and into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made the room spin. When they finally broke apart, he was grinning like a fool. "I do not have a ring yet. I will get you a proper ring, I promise. I do not need a ring right now. I just need you." Sarah kissed him again, and this time there was a heat to it that made clear intentions. "Lucas, we are already living in the same house. We are engaged now. I think we can bend propriety just a little further." His eyes darkened with want, but he hesitated. "Sarah, are you sure? I want to do right by you. You have been doing right by me since the day you fixed my fence. Make love to me, Lucas, please." They came together in her bed, the bed that had been so lonely for so long, and it was everything Sarah had read about in hidden novels but never experienced. Lucas touched her like she was something precious and worshipped, taking his time, making sure every moment was about her pleasure as much as his own. When they finally joined together, Sarah felt complete in a way she had not known was possible, and when they lay tangled together afterward, she felt tears slip free. "Did I hurt you?" Lucas asked immediately, concern filling his voice. "No. God, no. I am crying because I am happy." "I did not know it could be like that." He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "It can always be like that for the rest of our lives. I promise you, Sarah, I will spend every day making sure you know how loved you are." They were married 3 weeks later by the circuit preacher who came through St. Louis. It was a simple ceremony with only a handful of witnesses, but Sarah felt more married in those few minutes than she ever had in her first wedding. When Lucas slipped the simple gold band onto her finger, his hand shaking slightly with emotion, she felt her whole life shift into a new and better shape. The winter was hard, as winters on the plains always were, but they faced it together. The wheat they had planted took well, and the cattle stayed healthy. Lucas proved to be as good with managing money as he was with repairing fences, and slowly, painfully slowly, they began to see real progress. They paid off the debt Sarah had accumulated at the general store. They bought 3 more head of cattle with money earned from selling excess wheat. They made plans for spring planting and summer improvements. But more than the physical improvements to the farm, Sarah felt herself healing in ways she had not known she needed. Lucas made her laugh every single day. He listened when she talked about her fears and dreams. He held her through nightmares about losing everything and made love to her with a passion that never seemed to dim. They became true partners in every sense, and Sarah fell more in love with him every day. One cold February evening, as they sat by the fire, Lucas reading and Sarah working on embroidering a sampler, he looked up suddenly. "I have been thinking about something." "That is always dangerous," Sarah teased. "I am serious. I was thinking about names." "Names for what?" "For children. Our children when we have them." He set down his book and moved to sit beside her on the floor in front of the fire. "I know we have not talked about it much, but I want children with you, Sarah. I want to fill this house with noise and life." "Do you want that too?" Sarah's heart swelled. "I do. I want it very much. I was married to Thomas for 5 years and never conceived. I was starting to think maybe I could not have children. Sometimes these things just happen when they are meant to, and if children do not come, that will not change how I feel about you or our life together. But if they do come, I hope our first is a boy with your eyes or a girl with your determination or both." He took her hand. "I just want to build a family with you." "I want that too. I want everything with you, Lucas." He kissed her then, sweet and slow, and they made love on the rug in front of the fire with a tenderness that brought tears to both their eyes. Spring came with its usual rush of work. They planted corn and more wheat, increased the vegetable garden, repaired winter damage. The farm was truly beginning to thrive now, transformed from the failing operation Sarah had been running alone into something profitable. Neighbors who had written her off began stopping by to comment on the improvements, and though some of the older women still looked at her with disapproval for remarrying so quickly, Sarah found she did not care. She was happy, truly deeply happy, for the first time in her life. In late May, Sarah realized her monthly courses had not come. She waited another week, afraid to hope, before finally telling Lucas her suspicion over breakfast. He dropped his fork, his face transforming with joy. "Truly, you think you might be carrying?" "It is too early to be certain, but yes, I think so." Lucas came around the table so fast he nearly knocked over his chair, pulling her into his arms. "A baby, we are going to have a baby. Maybe we should not celebrate too much yet. It is early days and anything could happen." "I do not care. I am celebrating." He kissed her soundly. "This is the best news, the absolute best news." As the weeks passed and Sarah's condition became certain, Lucas became adorably overprotective. He insisted she rest more, that she not lift anything heavy, that she stay out of the hot sun. Sarah found it both touching and exasperating. "Lucas, I am pregnant, not made of glass. Women have been having babies while running farms for centuries. Not my wife carrying my child. You are precious cargo now. I was precious cargo before, even more precious cargo then." He kissed the top of her head. "Let me fuss over you. I have never gotten to do this before, and I want to enjoy every moment." Sarah relented, letting herself be cared for in ways she never had been during her first marriage. Lucas brought her breakfast in bed, rubbed her feet when they ached, read to her in the evenings with his hand resting gently on her growing belly. He talked to the baby, telling stories about the farm and making ridiculous promises about teaching their child to ride and rope, and all the skills a rancher's child would need. "What if it is a girl?" Sarah asked one evening as they lay in bed, Lucas's hand spread across her stomach. "Are you going to be disappointed?" "Disappointed? Sarah, I could not care less if we have a son or a daughter. I just want a healthy baby and you safe and well. That is all that matters to me." He kissed her temple. "Though I will say, a little girl with your fire would be something special. And a boy with your kindness would be extraordinary. Then I guess we will be happy either way." The baby came in early December during a cold snap that had ice forming on the inside of the windows. Sarah's labor was long and difficult, attended by the doctor from town and 2 neighboring women who had more experience with birthing than Lucas. He paced the kitchen floor for 12 hours, wearing a path in the boards, until finally the sound of a baby's cry broke through. The doctor emerged looking tired but pleased. "You have a healthy son, Mr. Xavier, and your wife is doing well, though she is exhausted." Lucas barely heard the rest, already moving past him to the bedroom where Sarah lay propped against pillows, looking pale and worn but radiant as she held a small bundle against her chest. When she looked up at him, her eyes were shining with tears. "Lucas, meet your son." He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the tiny red face of his child. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was making small snuffling noises against Sarah's chest. Lucas felt something break open inside him, a rush of love so fierce it almost brought him to his knees. "He is perfect. You are both perfect." Lucas sat carefully on the edge of the bed, reaching out to touch one tiny hand, the baby's fingers wrapped around his larger finger with surprising strength. What should we name him? They had discussed names for months without settling on anything definite. Now, looking at her son, Sarah said softly, "What about James Thomas Xavier? Thomas for my first husband, to honor his memory and the fact that he led me to this place where I eventually found you." Lucas felt emotion tighten his throat. "That is perfect, generous and right. James Thomas Xavier, welcome to the world, little man." The weeks after James was born passed in a blur of sleepless nights and overwhelming love. Lucas proved himself a devoted father, rising with Sarah for night feedings, changing diapers without complaint, spending hours simply holding his son and marveling at him. The farm work continued, though at a slower pace, and neighbors helped with some of the heavier tasks, brought food, offered the kind of practical support a new family needed. Sarah had never been so tired or so happy. Watching Lucas with their son, seeing the gentle way he cradled James and the awestruck expression on his face, made her fall in love with him all over again every single day. This was what she had been missing in her first marriage, this depth of partnership and passion and shared joy. One evening when James was about 6 weeks old, Sarah found Lucas standing beside the cradle just watching their sleeping son. She came up behind him, slipping her arms around his waist. "You are going to watch him sleep all night if I let you." "I might. I still cannot quite believe he is real, that this whole life is real. 2 years ago I was drifting alone, convinced I had nothing left to live for. Now I have you and James and this farm and a future that actually means something. How did I get this lucky?" "We both got lucky. You fixed my fence and asked to stay. If you had just moved on, I would have lost the farm that winter. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." Lucas turned in her arms to face her. "You saved me too. You gave me a reason to stop running and start living again. You gave me love and purpose, and now this beautiful child. I will never be able to thank you enough for taking a chance on a drifter who showed up on your doorstep. It was the best chance I ever took." They kissed, soft and sweet, careful of the sleeping baby nearby. Sarah thought about that day 18 months ago when Lucas had appeared on the road, dusty and alone, offering to fix her fence. She thought about how close she had come to sending him away, to clinging to her pride and her fear instead of accepting help. The thought of what she would have lost made her hold Lucas tighter. "I love you," she whispered against his chest. "I love our life. I love you too. Forever, Sarah. I promise you forever." The years that followed were not always easy because farming never was, but they were good years. The farm prospered under their joint management, growing from a failing operation into one of the more successful small ranches in the area. They added more cattle, bought the adjacent property when it came up for sale, built a new barn to replace the old one that finally gave up entirely. James grew into an energetic toddler with his father's kind eyes and his mother's stubborn determination. When he was 2, Sarah gave birth to a daughter they named Emma Rose, who had Lucas's dark hair and Sarah's fierce spirit. 2 years after that came another boy, Matthew James, who was quieter than his siblings but just as loved. The house that had been so lonely and empty filled with noise and life and love. Sarah often found herself pausing in her work to simply look around at her family and feel overwhelmed with gratitude. Lucas was an exceptional father, patient and loving, teaching their children about the land and animals while also making sure they learned to read and do figures. He told them stories every night, made them toys from scraps of wood, and never failed to tell them they were loved. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Lucas surprised Sarah with a trip into St. Louis for a proper celebration. They left the children with neighbors and spent the night at a hotel, eating dinner at a fancy restaurant, and taking a walk through the city streets like courting youngsters. "This feels scandalous," Sarah said, laughing as Lucas pulled her close on a quiet side street. "We are an old married couple with 3 children. We should be home mending socks or something practical. We are only 29 and 33. That is hardly old. And I want to court you all over again, remind you why you agreed to marry a drifter." He kissed her thoroughly, not caring who might see. "You are still the most beautiful woman I have ever known, and I fall more in love with you every single day. You are shameless. Only with you. Always with you." They made love that night with the freedom of being alone, without worrying about small ears or interruptions. And Sarah felt like a young bride again, cherished and desired and perfectly content. As they lay tangled together afterward, Lucas traced idle patterns on her shoulder. "Have I told you lately how grateful I am that you let me fix that fence?" Sarah laughed. "Only about 100 times, but I never get tired of hearing it. Good, because I plan to keep saying it for the next 50 years. He propped himself up on one elbow to look down at her. "I mean it, Sarah. You gave me everything. A home, a family, a purpose. You gave me love when I thought I would never feel it again. I know I am not always good with fancy words, but I need you to know that you are my whole world." Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. "You gave me the same things, Lucas. You showed me what real love feels like. You made me believe in myself again. You gave me a partnership I never knew was possible. Every day with you is a gift. Then I guess we are both pretty lucky. The luckiest." The next morning they returned home to find their children had helped the neighbors bake a lopsided cake to celebrate their parents' anniversary. James, now 5, was very proud of his role in cracking the eggs, even though Sarah suspected there were some shells in the batter based on the texture. But she praised it as the best cake she ever tasted, and they all ate it together as a family, sticky and sweet and perfect. The years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of farm life and the growth of their children. James learned to ride at 6, Emma at 5, and Matthew proved fearless on horseback despite being the youngest. They all helped with chores appropriate to their ages, learning the value of hard work and the satisfaction of a job well done. Lucas insisted they also continue their education, and Sarah taught them reading and writing and arithmetic every afternoon, determined that her children would have opportunities she had not. When James turned 10, he came to his parents with a serious expression. "Papa, Mama, I have been thinking. The farm is doing real well now, better than any of the neighbors. I think maybe we could help Mr. Thornton with his planting this year. He is getting old and his joints pain him, and his crops have not been good the last 2 seasons. Lucas and Sarah exchanged looks of pride. "That is very observant and kind of you, son," Lucas said. "What made you think of it?" "Well, you told me the story about how you helped Mama when she needed it, and how that changed everything for our family. I figure maybe we should help others when we can, like you were helped." Sarah felt tears threaten. "That is a wonderful idea, James. We will talk to Mr. Thornton and see what kind of help he needs." After the children were in bed that night, Sarah and Lucas sat on the porch, watching fireflies dance in the warm summer air. "We are raising good children," Sarah said softly. "We are. They are kind and hardworking and compassionate. They are going to make their mark on this world." Lucas took her hand, a gesture so familiar after years of marriage but still comforting. "I have been thinking about something. The farm is profitable enough now that we could afford to hire some help, take some of the burden off ourselves. Maybe even take a real trip somewhere, show the children more of the world than just Missouri." "A trip? Lucas, that is a grand idea, but the expense would be enormous." "We have been saving for years. We can afford it. And I want to give our children experiences beyond this farm, much as we love it. I want them to see that the world is bigger than these acres, even if they eventually choose to come back and work the land like I hope they will." Sarah thought about it, feeling that familiar flutter of possibility that Lucas had first awakened in her all those years ago. "Where would we go?" "I was thinking Chicago. We could take the train, stay for a week, see the museums and the stockyards and all the modern innovations. Let the children see what is possible in this changing world." "That sounds wonderful. Terrifying and expensive, but wonderful." They made the trip the following spring, and it was everything Lucas had promised and more. The children were awestruck by the city, by the tall buildings and electric lights and crowds of people. James was fascinated by the stockyards and the efficient systems for managing livestock. Emma loved the art museum, standing transfixed before paintings for so long they had to practically drag her away. Matthew was most impressed by the trains, watching them come and go with endless fascination. But Sarah's favorite moment came on their last evening, when they all sat together in their hotel room, and the children talked excitedly about everything they had seen. James said he wanted to come back when he was older, to learn about the newest ranching techniques. Emma announced she wanted to be an artist. Matthew said he wanted to drive a train or maybe build them. "You can be anything you want," Lucas told them seriously. "Your mama and I will support whatever dreams you have. But remember, whatever you do, the most important thing is to find someone to share your life with who makes you better than you are alone. Find someone who believes in your dreams and helps you achieve them. That is what your mama did for me, and it made all the difference." Sarah caught his eye and smiled, thinking about that day so long ago when a dusty cowboy had offered to fix her fence. She thought about how close she had come to saying no, to being too proud or too scared to accept help. She thought about all the moments since then, big and small, that had woven together to create this life she loved so much. When they returned home, the farm felt different somehow, smaller maybe, but also more precious. Sarah stood in the yard, looking at the neat fences, the sturdy barn, the house that had been expanded twice to accommodate their growing family, and felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This place that had almost defeated her was now thriving, a testament to hard work and love and partnership. Lucas came up behind her, slipping his arms around her waist in a gesture made comfortable by years of repetition. "Thinking deep thoughts, just reflecting on how far we have come. This place looks nothing like it did when you first arrived. This place looks like a home filled with love. That is what we built together, Sarah. Not just a successful farm, but a real home. He kissed her temple. And we are not done yet. We have years ahead of us to keep improving, to keep growing, to keep loving each other and raising our family. Promise me something, Lucas. Promise me we will always remember how lucky we are, that we will never take each other or this life for granted. I promise. How could I ever take for granted the woman who saved my life by letting me fix her fence? He turned her in his arms to face him. You are my whole heart, Sarah Xavier. You always will be. She kissed him there in the yard in full view of anyone who might see, not caring about propriety or what the neighbors might think, just loving this man who had shown her what real partnership and passion looked like. The years continued their march forward. The children grew into capable, compassionate adults. James eventually took over much of the day-to-day running of the farm, implementing new techniques he had learned from agricultural journals, and proving to have inherited both his parents' work ethic and business sense. Emma went east to study art, something that pained Sarah and Lucas, but also filled them with pride. She returned 2 years later with a teaching certificate and opened a small school in town, combining her love of art with practical necessity. Matthew surprised everyone by becoming a veterinarian, studying in Kansas City, before returning home to care for the animals of their community. All 3 children eventually married and started families of their own, though they stayed close to the farm that had shaped them. The house that had once been so empty became the center of a sprawling extended family, filled with grandchildren and Sunday dinners and holidays celebrated with joy. Sarah and Lucas grew older together, their hair turning gray and their movements slowing, but their love never diminishing. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Lucas took Sarah back to the spot where they had first met, where he had stopped to look at her broken fence all those years ago. The current fence was sturdy and well-maintained, a far cry from the collapsed disaster it had been. Lucas stood there with his arm around Sarah's still slim waist and smiled. I will never forget the first time I saw you standing on that porch, looking so fierce and determined and beautiful. I fell a little bit in love with you right then, though I did not realize it at the time. I thought you were going to rob me. I had my hand on my rifle the whole time you were talking. I know. I could see it, but you took a chance on me anyway. You let me stay and help, even though every practical bone in your body probably said not to trust a drifter. He turned to face her fully, taking both her hands in his. That was the best decision either of us ever made. Letting me stay changed both our lives. It did. You saved me, Lucas, not just the farm, but me. You reminded me that I was more than just a struggling widow. You made me feel alive again. You did the same for me. I was running from myself and my past, but you gave me a reason to stop running. You gave me a home and a purpose, and a love I never thought I would find. His eyes were bright with emotion despite the years. I have loved every single day with you, Sarah. The hard days and the easy ones, the struggles and the triumphs, all of it has been worth it because I got to spend it with you. That is the most romantic thing you have ever said to me, and that is saying something given how romantic you have always been. I am an old man now. I am allowed to get sentimental. You are only 58. That is hardly old. Then let me rephrase. I am a man who has lived long enough to know exactly how precious what we have is, and I want to make sure you know it too. I love you more today than I did when I first asked you to marry me, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. That is the beauty of what we have built. It just keeps growing deeper and richer. Sarah kissed him softly. I love you too. Forever and always, Lucas Xavier. They stood there together, 2 people who had found each other when they both desperately needed saving, and looked out over the farm they had built together through hard work and love and unwavering partnership. The land stretched before them, green and fertile and thriving, full of the next generation already learning to care for it. "Should we head back?" Sarah asked. "The grandchildren will be arriving soon for dinner, and you know how Emma gets if we are late." "In a minute. I just want to stand here a moment longer with you, right where it all began. Right where I fixed a fence and asked to stay, and you said yes." He pulled her closer. "Best yes I ever got. Best question I was ever asked." They walked back to the house hand in hand. The way they had walked together through everything life had thrown at them for 25 years. And as the sun began to set over the farm, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold, the house came alive with the sound of family gathering, of children laughing and dinner being prepared and love filling every corner. Lucas and Sarah stood on the porch, just as they had that first day, but now surrounded by everything they had built together. A successful farm, yes, but more importantly, a family bound by love and respect and the knowledge that sometimes the best things in life begin with a simple offer to help. "Thank you for fixing my fence," Sarah said softly. Lucas laughed, that warm, familiar sound she had loved for so many years. "Thank you for letting me stay." And in that moment, standing together with their children and grandchildren inside the house that had once been so empty, Sarah and Lucas knew they had built something that would last far beyond their own years. They had built a legacy of love, and it all began the day a dusty cowboy stopped to help a struggling widow and asked if he could stay. The evening passed in the beautiful chaos of family, with grandchildren underfoot and conversation flowing, and a table laden with food that represented decades of harvest and hard work. After dinner, when the younger children were playing outside and the adults sat around talking, young Jacob, James's oldest son, asked his grandfather to tell the story again. "What story is that?" Lucas asked, though he knew perfectly well what the boy wanted to hear. "The story of how you met Grandma. Please, Grandpa. I never get tired of it." Lucas looked at Sarah, and they shared a smile full of years and memories. "Well, it was September of 1878, and I was just about the most lost soul you ever saw, wandering the roads of Missouri trying to figure out what to do with my life. I had lost everything back in Texas and spent 2 years drifting from place to place, never staying anywhere long enough to matter. Then one hot afternoon, I came upon a farm with a fence that was falling down, and the most beautiful, stubborn woman I had ever seen standing on the porch looking like she was ready to take on the whole world by herself. "And you fixed the fence," Jacob prompted, even though he knew every word of the story. "I did. And then I did something that changed my whole life. I asked if I could stay and help. I did not know what I was asking for really. I thought maybe I would stay a few weeks, get the place back in order, and then move on like I always did. But your grandma," she looked at me with those fierce eyes of hers and said yes, and that yes changed everything. Sarah picked up the story. "Your grandfather worked harder than any man I had ever known. He fixed everything that was broken, planted crops, tended cattle, and somewhere along the way we fell in love. It was not what either of us was looking for, but it was exactly what we both needed. And then you got married and had Papa and Aunt Emma and Uncle Matthew and lived happily ever after," Jacob finished triumphantly. "That is right," Lucas said. "We did live happily ever after, because we learned that the best things in life are the ones you build together through hard work and love, and never giving up on each other." The children were satisfied with that, running back outside to play in the last light of evening. But Lucas's oldest grandson, James's boy, who was also named Lucas, stayed behind. He was 17 now, on the cusp of manhood, and his expression was serious. "Grandpa, I have been thinking. I know Papa runs the farm now, but I was wondering if maybe when I am a bit older, you would teach me your way of doing things. Not just the work, but the philosophy of it. How you and Grandma built all this from almost nothing." Lucas felt his chest swell with emotion and pride. "I would be honored, young Lucas. But the truth is, it was not my philosophy alone. It was something your grandma and I discovered together. The secret is simple, really. Find something worth fighting for, find someone to fight alongside, and never stop working to make tomorrow better than today. Do that, and you can build anything. And fix fences when they need fixing," Sarah added with a smile. "Always fix fences when they need fixing," Lucas agreed. "You never know what might come of it." As the evening drew to a close and family members began heading home, Sarah and Lucas stood on the porch waving goodbye, Lucas's arm around Sarah's shoulders. When the last wagon had disappeared down the road, they stood there in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of their land settling into night. "Are you tired?" Lucas asked. "It was a long day." "A good day, though. I love having everyone here, seeing how our family has grown." "We did well, Sarah. Not just with the farm, but with raising good humans who are now raising good humans of their own. That matters more than any amount of land or cattle." "It does." She leaned into him, still finding perfect comfort in his presence after all these years. "I am so grateful you stopped that day. I am so grateful you asked to stay. I am grateful you said yes. Best decision I ever made was asking. Second best decision was meaning it when I promised you forever." They went inside together, banking the fire and checking the locks, moving through the familiar routines of long marriage. In their bedroom, Sarah sat at her dressing table brushing out her hair, now more silver than brown, and watched Lucas in the mirror as he prepared for bed. He caught her watching and smiled. "What are you thinking about? How handsome you still are. How much I still love watching you do simple things like take off your boots. How lucky I am to have shared my life with you." Lucas crossed to her and took the brush from her hand, gently brushing her hair himself, something he had done countless times over the years. "I am the lucky one. You took a broken man and gave him a reason to be whole again. You gave me everything that matters. We gave each other everything. That is what partnership means." They climbed into bed together, and Lucas pulled Sarah into his arms the way he had every night for 25 years. She rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and felt utterly content. "Lucas?" "Yes, my love." "Do you think when we are gone, our grandchildren will remember us? Will they remember the story of how we met and what we built? I think they will remember that we loved each other and our family fiercely. I think they will remember that we worked hard and treated people with kindness and built something lasting. And I think they will tell their own children about the time a cowboy fixed a fence and asked to stay, and changed the course of generations." He kissed the top of her head. "But we have many more years to make memories with them. I am not done loving you yet." "Good. Because I am not done loving you either." They drifted off to sleep together, as they had for thousands of nights, secure in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious. A love that had started with a simple act of kindness and grown into a legacy that would outlast them both. The years rolled on, bringing the inevitable changes that time always brings. Lucas and Sarah eventually stepped back entirely from running the farm, letting James and young Lucas take over while they enjoyed the slower pace of their later years. They spent their days in simpler pursuits, tending Sarah's flower garden, taking slow walks around the property, spoiling their great-grandchildren when they visited. On a warm spring afternoon in 1908, 30 years after Lucas had first appeared on that dusty road, he and Sarah sat on the porch watching yet another generation of children play in the yard. Lucas was 83 now, Sarah 79, and both moved slower than they once had, but their minds were sharp and their love for each other had only deepened with time. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Sarah asked suddenly. "When you offered to fix the fence?" "I said a lot of things that day." "Which part?" "You said sometimes a thing needs doing and a man can do it, and that is reason enough. I think about that sometimes. How such a simple philosophy led to all of this." She gestured to the thriving farm, the playing children, the life they had built. "I meant it then, and I mean it now. Sometimes the best things in life come from simply doing what needs doing in the moment, without overthinking or worrying too much about the future. I saw a fence that needed fixing and a woman who needed help. I offered help. Everything else followed from that one simple choice. Everything else followed from my saying yes. I almost did not, you know. I almost sent you away because I was too proud and too scared to accept help from a stranger. But you did not. You took a chance on me, and I have spent every day since trying to prove myself worthy of that chance." Sarah took his weathered hand in her own, equally weathered now. "You proved yourself worthy that first day, Lucas Xavier. And every day since has just been confirmation that I made the right choice." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint golden light across their land. Young Lucas and his new wife were running the farm now with the same dedication and love that his grandparents had shown, already talking about improvements and plans for the future. The cycle continued, as it always did, but built on the foundation that Lucas and Sarah had laid all those years ago. As the sun began to set, Lucas turned to Sarah. "I love you, Mrs. Xavier. Have I told you that today? Only twice. You are slacking." She smiled to show she was teasing. "Then let me say it again. I love you. I have loved you for 30 years, and I will love you for whatever time we have left, and beyond that into whatever comes next. You are my heart, Sarah. My home. My whole world, and you are mine. Forever and always, Lucas, forever and always." They kissed, soft and sweet. The kiss of two people who had shared a lifetime and knew exactly how precious that was. And as the light faded and the children were called in for supper, and the farm settled into evening peace, Lucas and Sarah Xavier sat together on the porch where their love story had begun, grateful for every moment, every challenge, every joy that had brought them to this perfect present. The simple act of fixing a fence had led to the greatest love story either of them could have imagined, and that love had created ripples that would continue long after they were gone. In the end, that was the real legacy they left behind. Not just a successful farm or even a large family, but the knowledge that love and kindness and partnership could transform everything, could take two broken people and make them whole, could turn a failing farm into a thriving homestead, could create generations of love from one simple question. "Let me stay and help," and the answer that changed everything: yes.